we go. Number 12. We are starting to get into the double digits here. Still very new in the double digits, not in doing this podcast, obviously. So, let me see. Can I change my... Alright, that's all the way up. This one is... We really get into it. It's a bit longer. Talk more about the whole police situation and the culture that really led to some of the current events that are happening today. And, as I also say, it's going to be the last time that I get into it because, you know, not because I need to talk about other things eventually. And I think I kind of basically cover really what's my thoughts. So if you don't get it by now, that's your problem. Whatever. Anyways, so sit back, relax, and enjoy the show. Do you remember that old ad? We used to have that in my at my old movie theater back in my hometown. It was right after the old Disney movie came out. I don't even remember what it was called, but there was a couple of characters that were... It was a pair of moose, right? Animated mooses. Moose? Not mice. I don't know what the plural is. I think it's just moose. A couple of animated moose, cartoon moose. And they would have them on. It was Carmike Theaters is what I had in my hometown. And they were the ones that would come on at the beginning and do the whole, you know, oh, don't forget to get your popcorn. And don't forget to get your Coca-Cola. Turn your phone off. Don't kick the seat in front of you. And then at the very end, this was for years that they would run this, like theater ad intro. And at the end, one of them had like the doofy voice, be like, and sit back, relax, and enjoy the show. I gotta find that. It'd be funny if I could use it for this podcast, but I'm sure that's copywritten. So, yeah, enjoy. Oh, what's up, Closeteers? Time for another episode. And time for another edition of Postapocalypse. Alright. So, now a lot of these are actually going to be continuing on the, my foot itches. I get really dry soles, but that's not what's important. What is important is that a lot of these, God damn it. A lot of these focus on, you know, kind of continuing the conversation that we and the rest of the world really has been having. As far as, you know, police brutality and racism and all that fun stuff. So, first article I got for you, headline is Confessions of a Former Bastard Cop. Now, why that title? That title comes from, you know, one of the slogans or catchphrases that have been going around a lot of with a lot of the protests. The acronym ACAB, which stands for All Cops Are Bastards. So why do they say that? Because, well, now I've told you guys some of my experiences working as a security guard, right? And, you know, just kind of some of the pressures that you have to deal with in dealing with people and how it's very easy to, you know, get into a really us versus them type of mindset. But this article is actually pretty interesting because, well, and I didn't realize, you know, the depth of this, but, you know, it talks about, you know, the mindset and the training of police department officers. And I want to make a distinction too. There's different types of law enforcement, right? There's there's the police department, which is the issue here, right? And they're the main issue of a lot of these protests. And then there's sorry, I got tired. It's like 3 a.m. for me almost, and I'm still going through puberty apparently. So there's police departments. Then there's sheriff's departments, which I have no idea what the exact distinction is, but it's, from what I understand, a sheriff's department usually involves like a smaller community or neighborhood. I think it's population based. I'm not entirely sure, and I don't know if they're part of the same police unions, right? Whereas like a police department, as far as I can understand, they seem to exist in anything that's designated as like a city, right? So you got the police departments, you have the sheriff departments. Also sheriffs have, they aren't at the leadership with the sheriff's department, from what I understand, isn't as well, you know what, I'm not even going to say anything. I don't know what I'm talking about there. I just know that they're different, right? And then you have highway patrol, which mainly just deals with, highways and interstates, which and they really have a different job. They just deal with traffic violation. They don't deal with a lot of other things, right? Which kind of a funny aside, I actually have a friend who works as a highway patrol officer here in California, in and around LA. Whereas he used to work around DTLA, but now he moved up north where it's a bit calmer, I guess you could say. But it's always funny because he would tell me that, because he would work through the interstates and highways, which, run through and around and all over every major city, right? So that's his jurisdiction, or their jurisdiction, I guess. And he would say that every time he pull over somebody in the city, they would see him walking up and with the brown uniform instead of the blue. He'd get to the window, license and registration, and these people would be sitting there like, well, what are you doing? Because everybody equates highway patrol with like a rural environment and not so much an urban environment. But, again, interstates and highways, that's their jurisdiction. You're not going to see them on the streets, on like just a regular city street. Also, I did find it interesting. I don't remember if I talked about. I did end up going down to. I did end up working down in LA while they were still having the protests going on, and they're still having protests now. It's been like 2 weeks almost. Good for them. That's some stamina, or fortitude, I should say. And I only saw like a couple of police barricades, but those were all highway patrol, and they weren't near like the main area where all the protests and stuff like that were. But yeah, so anyway, so this article, Confessions of a Former Bastard Cop, it talks about the kind of some of the different issues as far as what is taught to a police officer. I talked about warrior training before, which isn't really a part of it's not a part of this like the standard police training, but like continued education, I guess you could say. And in some cities this is outlawed because warrior training and things like that, it instills, or it's meant to instill a real sense of like us versus them. Except you're doing it with a group of people who have clearance to kill, basically. It's almost a license to kill. That Bond shit is real, I guess. Or there want to be Bonds. And, it really distorts the job and that the police departments are supposed to be doing, and it distorts the mentality that they have, right? So, yeah, basically, as they go through continued education and also just the culture of the police departments, they just get hammered and hammered and hammered with us versus them, shoot first, ask later. And now where this really gets me is whenever I first heard about the whole George Floyd affair, murder, I'll put it that way. The first thing that I thought was, this is just how my brain works. The first thought that popped into my head was like, oh, I should be a cop because I'm a good person and I could make things better, right? Well, that's not the case because it's deeper than that. You have, like I said, each department it's like basically what you have are clandestine paramilitary organizations that legally operate within a city and are supported by police entities, legal entities, aka police unions, that protect their members regardless. Even if they're just the biggest scumbags, they just follow their own principle. Because, you take one down, it's probably, it becomes easier and easier to, take the rest down, I guess you could say. You establish, if you, because one of the only ways to arrest a police officer and get them in jail, and I'm not entirely sure if this is true with other branches of law enforcement, but in order to put an officer in jail, for the most part, they have to be found guilty of a conviction that is exactly the same as something that somebody else had already been convicted of as a police officer. And we're talking down to the minutia of details, right? I was watching John Oliver, and after reading this article, actually, and it kind of helped to bring some points. There I go again. It helped to really explain some concepts, right? He gave an example of one case where I guess some officer had shot somebody in a roadside ditch who was unarmed and killed them, right? But the case was thrown out because the closest so the description of what this officer was being for was shooting and killing an unarmed suspect in a roadside ditch or something similar like that. the closest case, or the closest precedent case, was an officer who had been arrested for shooting and killing an unarmed suspect in a grassy ravine, which anyone with their head screwed on straight knows that's exactly the same thing, but the wording is different, so it was thrown out. And nose itches. That's the kind of bullshit that we're dealing with, right? And you know that, and like every continued, a lot of the, you know, these police unions, they push a continued education that, you know, basically it just teaches, you know, their officers how to kill people, right? Try and stay alive. Yeah, I mean that's just, and you know, I even saw another article because like I said, I thought my mindset was like, you know, oh, if you just get like more good people to join the police, that'll solve the problem. That's not how it works. It won't work. I even saw another article earlier today, which I don't know why I didn't save it, but it was an article by an African American police officer who he had a story where he was I don't remember what city he's in, but apparently there was a group of cops called the Big Four, and they were famous for, you know, basically just showing up and beating the shit out of random black people without, you know, making any arrest or charge. And, you know, this man, he got beaten by these cops when he was 14. So he decided, you know what? I think it was Detroit, if I remember right. I might be wrong, but he decided, you know, I'm gonna be a police officer, and I'm gonna, you know, help foster, you know, reforms and change in my department. And what he found, he was, like I said, he was a black man, is that people, like his fellow officers, I was going to say coworkers, but that's not really the right word, but yeah, his fellow officers, you know, like the white ones, wouldn't speak to him, would undermine his actions, and would even like go so far as to like put dividers in the squad car if they were partnered up with him. And the last part, I didn't read the whole thing, but the last part was that, you know, there were even occasions where his fellow officers like even tried to kill him in uniform in a squad car with the camera and everything. So yeah, just straight up racism, pretty much, which I guess doesn't exactly tie into the puberty. It doesn't exactly tie into, you know, the culture. Well, it does tie into the culture, not so much the training, but, you know, it just all just makes a huge cocktail of shit, which there aren't a lot of solutions for, except for this next article that I got here. See what I did there? This one reads, America's most dangerous city defunded its police department 7 years ago. It's been a stunning success. That city was Camden, New Jersey. They had a major problem with police corruption, you know, just, you know, being racist and planting drugs. Not just targeting, you know, minorities, but just whoever they wanted, right? So what the city actually doing, apparently, and I didn't know about this before either. I don't think most people have heard about this, and I'm sure that a lot of police departments and unions probably wouldn't want you to know about this. God damn it. That's my voice going to shit, apparently. Just like this country, apparently. But anyways, So I guess what they did is the city fired all of them. Just completely disbanded the police department, severing their labor union, essentially. And what they did is they created a what did they make? Where is it? So yeah, in 2012, Camden was the most dangerous city in the United States. I'm quoting the article here, with over 170 open-air drug markets in just 9 square miles, under the watch of the CPD. I guess that would be called Camden Police Department. Also had a big problem with police corruptions and officers routinely planting drugs on its citizens, which is pretty much the opposite of protect and serve. Which, that's the thing with these police departments that we're really starting to see now is, there are plenty of people who are police officers, I'm sure, who are nice and don't do all this fucked up shit. But as a whole, what's their motto? Protect and serve. We now unanimously, that's a lie. It's a fucking lie, and it gets people killed. So what did Camden do? Where was it? Crime City wanted to add more. Okay, so I'm just reading parts of the article. So they had a crime problem, and originally they would try. They thought that they could. They tried to solve their problems by adding more officers onto the streets, right? But again, you're just throwing more bodies into this, as I said, paramilitary group that does not have the interests of its community as their primary goal. Unofficially, of course. But, so, I was saying that each unionized officer would cost the city $182,000 average with benefits per year, I guess. So, Camden completely disbanded their police department and created a new county community force instead. So, this community force is not part of one of the standard police labor unions, and they cost less per city, so they rehired 100 of these former officers, right? But not just like you're back. No, these people had to reapply and requalify for their jobs correctly this time. I guess technically. I guess technically they were correctly before, but I'm assuming that I'm assuming if I learn to talk one of these days and, speak a relevant thought, maybe we'll have a good podcast and get some real numbers. But my assumption is that if they had any officers that, had like a lot of complaints or I want to say convictions, not convictions, charges, prior charges, they probably just didn't even look at them. They fuck off, go somewhere else. Unfortunately, they can go somewhere else because, that's another thing with police unions is, if an officer manages to get himself fired, that doesn't, not disqualify. it doesn't invalidate their police officer license, so they can just go somewhere else and unfortunately that somewhere else is going to be a neighborhood or a community that they aren't even really a normal part of, so they literally just become a hired gun, like a thug or something like that. So anyways, Camden, the city of Camden did this, and this is literally what is meant when I'm sure everybody's heard by now the whole defund the police argument. This is literally what that means. So they parsed down their police force that they had, rebranded them, got rid of the fucking police union that they had, and the city was able to reallocate funds to other community building initiatives, i.e. mental health, education, transport, whoever, workplace programs, dealing with abandoned property, shit like that. They benefited from doing this, and now this is what a lot of other cities, or well, not so much cities, but other communities are calling for. Get rid of the organization that we have right now, start something new, and and stop wasting money, basically. Because what happens is, I think I spoke about this before, but we've gotten to the point where a lot of city governments and the federal government, really, they've been taking money away from a lot of social programs like education and transportation, workplace stuff like benefits, or not so much benefits, but benefits. And then the problems that arise from this lack of support, they just say, oh, you know what, send the cops to do it. So instead of getting, the people the help that they need for, like mental health or hospitalization or economic benefits, they just throw everybody in jail. Private jail, by the way. So really the government is, and the thing is they have a lot of trouble. It's very easy for a police union to sway a vote their way, because they can just say like, oh, well, they want to, take away our powers. Okay, well, I guess we can't stop all these murders that are happening. And then, of course, people who don't know any better are like, oh, well, I guess we should keep throwing more money at the police. But, I mean, it's just a classic case of you can't solve a problem by throwing money at it. So that's that. Next article is a little bit different. So this is a bit of a bummer, too. I'll just read it. Trump gives you COVID-19 at his rally. You can't sue him. Which, for those of you who don't know, and you should know by now, this year is an election year, again. And just like last time, he's going to start burping all over the place and losing his voice. No, maybe. I mean, he's got some problems, mental and physical. So who knows what's going to happen? We have our first orange retarded president. We already do. We already do have that. But yeah, he's going to be going on his rallies, and I mean, I guess if I'm being fair, he's already got a lot of other lawsuits to deal with, right? Why bother with this shit? Whatever. Quick break. Today I am drinking a new brand. It's called, this is not an ad, by the way. It's never an ad. I want ads someday. Even if it's not like a major payout, it'd just be a start. Today the brand I'm drinking is Made West Brewing Company. This is the standard brew. It's a light ale. Where is this shit made? Brewed in Ventura. That's here in California. That's close to LA, but it's kind of more on the outskirts. A bit more northwest-ish from where I am. It's not bad. It's nice and light. It does have like a very... It has like that hoppy twang when it first hits your tongue, and then it just goes away. So that's interesting. And also, labeling's kind of interesting. It's kind of they went with like the real simple, clean, postmodern look. It's like the Beverly Hills of beer cans, pretty much. But I don't mind it. This only came in a 4-pack too, which is too bad. But it is one of the 16 ounce taller ones. A bit more of a funnier article. Pepper spray only seasoning white cop knows how to use. Sounds about right. It is pepper. I suppose there is a there's a slight I want to say concession, but I suppose we should be glad that they're not using real mace, because that would permanently damage people. But I don't know. And that also ties in with a that one's from the Hard Times, obviously satire, but that also ties in with the old joke of white people conquered the entire world for spices, and now they don't even use them except for ketchup. But I don't think that was even like a world spice. Which brings us to the next article, which is a little more, this was a real one. Scotland votes to call for end to UK exports of tear gas and rubber bullets to the US. I agree with this. This is a good thing. Because, well, okay, first of all, the rubber bullets, by the way, they aren't like little bullets, right? These things are like, I don't know if you ever play like a video game or something like that, and you get a grenade launcher, right? The single tube, the crack breach, whatever the fuck it's called. But they have the big shells that are like this big, and they're solid, right? Those rubber bullets, that's how big these things are. They're huge. They're metal. They aren't actually rubber. They are solid metal slugs coated in rubber that they shoot out. And the idea with these things is, what I didn't know is you're supposed to shoot them at the ground so that they ricochet off and hit a person in the legs, and it's like banging your shin, right? But again, with the PD culture, their kill and protect themselves culture, and as you've seen from a lot of the videos of protests, they aren't bouncing these things off the ground like they're supposed to. They're just shooting people in the face, right? And the thing is, these things, the fact that they're metal, and with the propulsion system that they use, they do break skin. If somebody gets like hit in the face, they could be mentally damaged. They'll go blind because one of those things is going to completely destroy your orbital socket and your eye. Like, you'd be done, right? There was even a story of some kid who got hit in the forehead with one of these quote unquote rubber bullets, and he's, well, forgive my non-PC-ness, but he's like partially retarded now, basically. I would imagine it's kind of, I had a friend back in the day, back when I was in high school, who he was in a car accident and he was T-boned on his driver's side. And the thing is his window was, sorry, use this hand. Keep forgetting this hand's out of the camera, but his window was halfway up. So whenever he got hit, his head, slammed into the window and he got glass in his brain, and he started, all day for a while until he eventually had surgery to get the glass taken out of his brain. I imagine what this kid is probably suffering is kind of the same as that. So that's that. The tear gas, on the other hand, it's a gas weapon, which this didn't really hit me at first. I didn't know about this, but, I guess I kind of did, but I didn't put two and two together. For those of you who don't know, gas weapons are outlawed as per the Geneva Convention. For those of you who don't know what the Geneva Convention is, that convention was set up following World War II to prosecute war crimes based on what the Nazis did, primarily and especially killing Jewish people. Everybody knows, put them in gas chambers, and then they either buried them, sometimes alive, or they burned them. Right? Now, gas is... Okay, gas falls under NBC, nuclear, biological, chemical. Obviously, gas is a chemical weapon because it's not a virus, right? Tear gas isn't a virus. It's just a gas that it gets into your system and it just, completely screws with your eyes and your nose and throat, maybe your ears too. I don't know, but it is illegal to use tear gas in war, but for some reason it's being allowed to be used in a police action. So on their own people, right? And it even, and anybody who's seen any video of the protests will see that a lot of times, these, tear gas is being used unprovoked, right? Beer's starting to come up on me. I'll get a little bit gassy, but, and there was even a story a little while back where there was some girl who, at a protest, it was said that, she died from inhaling tear gas. And the original story was that the original assumption was that she had asthma, but it turned out that she didn't have asthma. She was just stuck in the middle of a tear gas cloud and suffocated. There's a reason that you can't... using tear gas is a war crime. Our police officers in a lot of these cities that have protests essentially carried out legal unionized war crimes. That's the long and the short of it. Yeah. That's all the articles I have, or that I want to share. Yeah. So there you have it. That's why people started saying, hey, ACAB, all cops are bastards. I do have I'm in the position where I don't actually have any law enforcement in my family at all. In fact, I have some people who are on the other end of the spectrum at times. Won't talk about that. I don't really know the full details anyway. But I can see how it would be. This year has definitely been hard on people who do have law enforcement in their family, because either they're either being the target of, I don't want to say discrimination, but discrimination, or they're being forced to have, hard conversations with their families and with themselves. This thing looks like it's fucking moving. Whatever. Here. I look regal now. It's like falling on me. So these people have to have hard conversations with, like I said, their families and themselves, because they're put in a situation where you get blamed by association, basically. And, well, like I said, I don't really have any experience with that, fortunately. So, there isn't really a whole lot I can say in that lane. But, I mean, I have seen people who... Sorry, I'm not there. Out there in the wild. AKA the rest of the house. But... the fuck am I trying to say? Here, let me... Ooh. Take another swig. Maybe they'll help jog my memory. Or not my memory, but my words. They say that it is the mark of a genius when they can't find the right words. I think, case in point, because they think faster than they can speak. So, whatever. I'm a genius. That's what I'm taking away from that. That's my selective reasoning or selective hearing, I guess. I'm just, constantly proving that point. But yeah, so I don't really know what they have to deal with, I guess. Fortunately, I don't have to. Speaking of things that, but god damn it. As you can see, I finally managed to get rid of my scruffy looking do, and I now have this beautiful coif because my barber finally opened up again. Well, it's a chain, but a nice one. Haircuts are finally open again. Or, not haircuts, hair salons and barber shops are finally open again. Oh, fuck. How long have I been going? Oh, it's 40 minutes already, Jesus Christ. And a lot of restaurants are starting to open again. As you know, I do delivery, so I've been seeing a lot more people, dining in again and all that stuff. There still isn't a lot of traffic, so I am happy about that, but... oh, yeah. That was a good one. Not really. That one sucked, too. There was... Fuck, what else did I want to talk about? Oh, yeah, I've also been learning some more interesting things, just... again, more shit about the police. Next episode... This is going to be the last episode that I talk about law enforcement. But this, what I'm going to talk about now is more about psychology, so I might continue on with a little bit of that. But, I've been finding out more interesting things about law enforcement. Or at least, law enforcement in general. So, I didn't really know this, but apparently the very first like conception and iteration of a police department was the slave patrols, which, for those of you who have been living under a rock, when the United States was originally founded, it, like many other, when I say many other, I mean like every other country in the world, used slavery pretty much through and through, all over the place. And, well, as you all know, the United States and, well, the original colonizers of the Americas and what would be known as the United States eventually, a lot of them were fleeing persecution in their countries of origin, namely, like Europe and England and Spain, which are all in Europe. So, just repeating myself. A lot of the times they were fleeing religious persecution. And, yeah, I mean, a lot of those countries, they had plenty of their own forms of slavery. Usually it was, like their own people. And it was mostly, I believe that was what indentured servitude was. Basically, you would have people working at, like, not for pay, but, yeah, just not for pay, for free. Either because some debt was owed, or they were, they had lost a war or a battle or something like that, or they were just considered lesser than, right? And which ties into what I was saying, that a lot of the early colonists of the Americas were fleeing. I got it right that time. They were fleeing religious persecution because they were being enslaved because of their religion. For the most part, I think that's kind of like the whole Catholic versus Protestant thing. I don't know all the details, but they came here. The point is that they still brought the concept of slavery with them. And of course, we eventually gained our independence from Great Britain or whatever, but through like exploration and trade following independence, and even before then, even during our own colonization, at least in the Americas, it went from religious persecution to racial persecution, and that's how we eventually ended up with the majority of, what am I trying to say? That's how we ended up with enslaved African Americans in our country, because it was, unlike with religion where you could like kind of hide that, it was even easier to persecute these people because, hey, look, I'm a completely different color. I literally look completely different than this other person, and they stand out like a sore thumb. And also distressing is, like, hey, their country of origin was willing to sell them to us. These, you got to remember, like, I'm not trying to diminish history or anybody's experience or anything like that, but that is something that you do have to remember, is that the European colonists didn't just go to Africa and grab a bunch of people. No, they bought them from whoever, fucking warlords or tribal leaders or something like that. Which, again, that's just an aside. It's just what happened. they were still, the point being is they were still brought over, and their physical differences were used to persecute them, and in many ways that's still the case. But the point that I'm getting to is that the original is that following this practice or business of the slave trade came the slave patrols, especially in the South, and that's what, through many different, twists and turns in history, that eventually became the police departments that we know today. There goes my voice again. Still going through puberty. Much like our country, still going through racism. That's just, every police department can literally trace the lineage of their practice and culture back to slavery. Like that. Hello? I think I speak for everybody when I say that that's bullshit. And the fact that that hasn't changed is also bullshit. But, well, the kind of the point that I wanted to get around to in this sort of roundabout way is that, whether it's, it all leads to, just persecution, right? It's just a way of taking, my people and separating us and elevating us from your groups of peoples, right? First it was through religion, and then it was through race, and now, again, it's also kind of because of religion. If you see, not so much here, more in, other parts of the world, aka the Middle East. Motherfucker. Apparently I'm still a child. I might grow up one of these days. But it won't be today. But the rest of the country needs to grow up. That's the fucking message here. That's what I was saying. Persecution. Okay, so let me see if I can tie this in. So I've had people in my life who... Let me start over. Okay. When you look at... everybody knows, or should know, what the concept of yin and yang is. This is... where does yin and yang come from? You know what? Let's look that up. Pause. Probably used that wrong. That was insensitive of me. I don't give a shit. There's enough. I'll fly under the radar. How about that? Okay, yin, yang, origin. Chinese. It's from China. Basically, so you guys have all seen the yin yang symbol. Put it up here. The idea is that there is a balanced contrast between light and dark. They go together and they are intertwined. And you'll also notice that within, and it's represented by the black and white swirl. Or not swirl, but whatever the fuck this is. But you'll also notice that within the light, there's a little bit of dark. And within the dark, there's a little bit of light. So what's that mean? That means equal balance between all things, namely within the human psyche, within the individual person, and within the community as a whole. Which, one of the things that I've found, or that I've come to realize, this is my own philosophy on humanity, is that I think what most people don't realize is that humanity exists in a dichotomous state. A person exists as an individual with their own thoughts, their own feelings, their own desires, their own needs, and they also exist as a part of a communal whole. Not dissimilar to, say, a hive, for instance, right? But with more different types of parts being the point. So, like I said, each individual person has their own individual wants, needs, desires, thought patterns, processes, what have you. But at the same time, they also have they also have the ability to fill a slot or like a piece of the puzzle within a communal whole in whichever community they happen to be a part of, right? And that community could be, as small as a marriage or a family, like an immediate family. Fucking Christ. Made my fucking voice here. Small as a family or as big as a nation, for example, right? So, if you... The point being is that for the most part, a community needs every single one of its existence is based completely off of those individuals, right? And those individuals fulfill different segments. Now, the thing that a lot of people don't understand is that when I say community, I don't mean like in a modern aspect. I mean in a group survival aspect, right? So, that goes down to biological instincts and needs and such like that. So there, it's very it's well documented that the human brain hasn't really truly evolved in a long time. So there is still a very deep part of our own psyche that is in survival mode. Like, we have to figure out a way to protect ourselves from these, giant fucking mammoths and saber-toothed tigers and stuff like that. And then eventually, we have to protect ourselves from this other tribe of people that, they're, we're doing well, but they're not. And nobody wants to share, right? So there's that. But then, that there's also the difference between, the communal existence and the individual existence. Or, not existence, but, I can't think of the word for it. The communal and the individual. We'll say that. So, until, at least in modern culture, until more recently, the individual wasn't really that important. Like, nobody really cared, right? People were just sort of, became part of the system, got worked, and that was it. Nowadays, culturally, the individual has become more and more important, right? Whether or not it's like, but here's the point, but not necessarily important to the community, right? So, fuck. I'm trying to figure out how to put my words together here. I will figure it out eventually here. Just give me a sec. The problem that people are having now is that I don't think most people really truly understand the so the individual communal existence, they exist parallel in a person's life, right? They very rarely do they oppose each other, and they almost never complement each other, right? So it's very, that's why they say, like the old saying, do what you love and you'll never work a day in your life. Well, most people don't have the luxury of doing exactly what it is they want to do to satisfy their own needs by helping the community, right? It's almost always two different things. What I have people, or I've had people in my life who are very much about the individual, and I imagine most people do now too, right? You hear a lot about, self-love. This is important. This is a real thing. However, I believe there is a point where you can take, if you build up the individual aspect of your existence, you can get to a point so much so that the communal aspect of your existence is completely worthless, and you are practicing basically separatism and isolation. If you do this if a big enough, this is kind of a weird roundabout way of saying this, but if you do this in a big enough group, say like an individual community, the idea is, so if you practice, say like self-love and self-actualization, you also start to see a lot of concepts of, everybody's seeing, I still don't know how to speak. But everybody sees things about like, remove negativity from your life. Either they be negative people, negative processes, yada, yada, yada. So first thing about that is, now remember, these are psychological issues. Most people do not have the experience or the training to actually understand what is the difference between a negative thing in your life versus a necessary thing in your life, right? So, I've had people in my life who are very individualistic, but they will absolutely abhor and shun anything that is, doesn't exactly meet their own goals, right? AKA anything that's different. To the point where like you are unreliable, right? Nobody can depend on you because you are selfish. And selfishness is basically just taking the individual. It is the extreme version of the individual existence of a person to the complete detriment of the communal existence of that person, right? So that would, I personally, I get skeptical of, anytime I see like this is basically, take for example like the influencer. well, we see, these people, a lot of times they will preach, removing negativity from your life and the avoidance of conflict to any extent possible, right? And that all things that fall under those categories are to be avoided, possibly even shunned, and just to be put beneath you. Now, if you take a big enough group of people who feel this same, they will begin to see anything that does not meet their goal as an individual or even as like a small community as different, and therefore something that is to be shunned or removed or placed below you. When those differences are as easy to discern as how one person looks compared to another, I think you guys can do the math. It's not, that's how you end up with persecution. You're taking, you are putting another person or group of people, you or your community, for just the simple fact of difference. And you have recoiled from that difference so much that you're afraid of it. And you put it beneath you as something that needs to be abhorred and shunned and removed. Now, this is the same kind of mindset that in a more convoluted, roundabout way is where racism comes from. And classism, I guess, while we're on that too, but mainly racism. The point being is that it's, persecution of differences. I feel like I know something that for some reason other people don't know. And it's like it's like knowing something that I'm not supposed to know. And I don't really know what to do with it. Yeah. And just in closing, another thing that kind of popped up that I didn't really talk about yet on this episode earlier was, I did think it was funny that apparently the Marine Corps has finally, not any of the other branches, but just the Marines, they finally banned the use of, or the display of, which makes sense, because that's something that should have happened a long time ago. Which, for those of you who don't know, the Confederate flag is the flag of the Confederacy, which existed when parts of the South tried to secede from what they say is states' rights. However, the main right that they were fighting about was the right to, or well, not so much the right, but just the practice of the slave trade business, which had already been more or less removed in the northern states in the United States. And, that's what resulted in the Civil War, and obviously they lost, right? So basically this is a flag of another country, a secessionist and traitor country, really. Now, which is fine, that's, it should be in the past. But the problem is that for some reason, a lot of people, fucking ads, whatever. A lot of people are fucking ads, as told to us by South Park. But no, a lot of people in the South, they'll still have Confederate flags, in different places. Like maybe they'll have one up in their room, or like on a sticker on their car, or something like that. And they'll try to say that, it's our Southern heritage, Southern pride, right? Two things wrong with this. For everybody else, it's a symbol of, oppression against minorities, typically, or not typically, but specifically black people, right? It kind of ended up being the flag for slavery. Now, it's obviously horrible, but the second thing, and which is more, I want to say like a legal issue or a nationalist issue maybe, is it's a flag of treason, right? Like it represents a group of people who, that was pretty important right there. Not really. But more importantly, from what I've understand, something that I found out recently is the Confederacy only lasted a total of like 5 years. For anybody who, you cannot build, you cannot claim or build a heritage, 5 fucking years. It's not the same as like saying like, yeah, the example that I saw specifically in this was, you can't say like, oh yeah, my heritage is from Ireland, a country that has existed for the last 400 years. 400, 500, a lot more than 5 years. Like, that's a heritage. Using the Confederate flag to try and symbolize Southern pride and Southern heritage is just wrong. And really, either you really just really focused on like the whole white pride thing and saying it's heritage, or you're just stupid, which is not, doesn't really something that would put past a lot of people, to be honest. Hell, even I've done stupid things, and I've got more degrees than most people. Look where that's gotten me so far. I haven't really even bothered applying to a lot of things. As nice it would be to have a day job, I haven't really bothered applying to a lot of things, because, everybody's still, doing the whole work from home type of business, which, all right, I'm adding on to, this is going to be a bit longer than I thought it was going to be, but, something interesting that really, hit me was, so I remember I saw another, I don't remember if it was like a post or another article. I don't have it. I didn't save it. I didn't really think ahead about that, but, there's a bunch of different cable companies, or, like internet and cable service providers across the U.S., obviously, because if there wasn't, that'd be a monopoly, and that's technically illegal. Whatever, right? So, one called Cox, C-O-X, which I'm not sure exactly where they all are, but I know I used to live in Nebraska, and that's what we had, or Omaha, Nebraska, and that was the cable company that we had there. So what they've been doing is they will actively throttle people's bandwidth if they're using what they consider to be an excessive amount. And apparently they also offer, unlimited bandwidth packages, but yeah, some people are being, they're making it harder for them to do stuff. And which I thought, like, okay, or what most people think, like, okay, well, maybe they're doing something, you know, legal, like downloading a bunch of torrents or some bullshit like that, right? But, you know, doing, for example, you know, I'm doing this podcast. It's kind of my own business. I want it to be my own business and monetize and all that bullshit. But for, you know, it's not really a thing for me because I do this all beforehand. You know, I'm not doing it live, but like, what if somebody is like a Twitch streamer? You know, that's live, that uses bandwidth, and suddenly the company that, or the provider that you rely on is just, you know, fucking it up for you based on their own thing. Like, no, that's bullshit. You know, especially if you're providing unlimited service, then you should actually, you know, then you're going back on it. That's, you know, it doesn't, I don't have to tell you that's bullshit, but it is, and I'm telling you, and that's what it is. And it's especially more of an issue now that, now that we've had, or it taps into another issue, you know, now that we've had this whole lockdown and a lot of people have been switching to working from home during this whole thing. It's, which is fine, you know, that makes sense during a pandemic lockdown or any other kind of stay-at-home situation that happens, which hopefully will never happen again, but it might. But the thing is a lot of companies have been saying, because I used to work in visual effects, right? So I hear a lot of things from like a lot of different people in a lot of different studios saying like, oh, well, we should just keep doing working at home. You know, we've been tooling our business up to accept more work at home employees, which sounds great. However, you also have to take into account that this is basically a way for you know, companies to offload a lot of their like utility costs and responsibilities to individual private citizens, right? So that means that, let's say, you know, a VFX artist, if they sign up with a studio that's, you know, work at home, they now you would think that normally, you know, whenever you go to work, you go to a studio or what have you, and this doesn't have to just be VFX, but this is especially true because there's a lot more technical stuff and software that's being used. Obviously, you go to a studio and all of that is provided. But if they, you know, go more for work-at-home employees and eventually try to mandate it to be just work-at-home employees, then, you know, they have grounds to make everybody like a real independent contractor with like an actual 1099, unlike what they have now, which is usually just temporary workers. And then everybody's responsible for their own software and their own hardware. So the entry cost goes up, you know, even more than it already is with school and all that stuff. And they're all and those workers are then also more on the hook for their own utilities, especially power, because, you know, if you're doing unless like a studio provides their own render capabilities, which they would have to, especially for something as you know, taxing as visual effects, but you know, just you know, the power uses of using like these different types of software and the hardware that you need are pretty high. And if you're working, you know, a regular shift plus overtime, which usually happens with a lot of projects towards the end of post-production project like a movie or a TV show, which is just like all the time. You're working overtime. You're using a lot of electricity, probably a lot of bandwidth, because you got to send all of your work and renders over to the studio. That's a lot. You're going to be paying a shitload. And it's also not fair if you're like me, and let's say that I got one of these jobs working for a studio at home. The extra power that I'm using is then going to be split out to everybody that I live with, because I live in a house with a bunch of roommates. It wouldn't be fair to them. And basically the studio wouldn't have to, they wouldn't be responsible for any of that. That's what I'm saying. So, point is, TLDR, it's all bullshit. Everything's bullshit. Last bit of funny thing, going back to the whole Confederate flag thing, is also NASCAR. Apparently, they also decided that they're going to ban the display of the Confederate flag for the same reason, which is it's kind of a ballsy move for them, because a lot of their fan base is from the South. I don't have to go into like the stereotypes there, but yeah, so they said like no more Confederate flags, keep that bullshit at home. And so one driver came out and said like, okay, well, I don't like your decision to ban wow, I just got lightheaded all of a sudden. I don't know, it was my first beer of the night. Maybe my last. I only have one more. Dude, I can't. I hope that some stuff starts opening up soon. I want to go out. I don't know about you guys. I think I already talked about it, but I have seen some restaurants are starting to open up and letting people come in. But what was I gonna say? Yeah. So this driver, I can't remember his name off the top of my head. It was like something Cicerel. He says like I don't agree with your decision to. He's basically calling it censorship, right? Which in a way it is, but I mean, go fuck yourself. So he says like at the end of the current season, I'm gonna be retiring. He made like a whole Facebook post about it and all that stuff, to which basically the whole world, including NASCAR, was like, who? This guy apparently has, well, whenever you're a driver, you're part of a team, right? So this guy has no wins at all in his career, which means that he's just a support driver on another team. So it's like, all right, don't let the door hit you on the way out. He's basically their Star-Lord, but at the beginning of the movie. Anyway, so yeah, this podcast is this episode's a pretty long one, so I hope you liked it, and we'll do this shit again next week.